The automatic doors of the airport slid open with a soft hiss, letting in the sticky morning air as I tightened my grip on Leo's small hand. He was buzzing with excitement, his Mickey Mouse backpack bouncing with each hop, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet ahead. Calvin walked briskly, his jaw set, designer luggage in tow. And then there was Vivian, perfectly pressed in a cream blouse and oversized sunglasses, her expression cold enough to flash freeze a volcano. I'd hoped, stupidly, naively, that maybe this trip would soften her sharp edges, that the sunshine and sea might melt the frost in her voice. But the way she glanced back at us, eyes narrowed and mouth puckered in thin disapproval, I knew better. "Mommy, are we going to sit by the window on the plane?" Leo asked, skipping beside me. He was 5, pure joy, full of questions, and the only reason I hadn't screamed years ago. "I hope so, baby," I smiled, brushing a curl off his forehead. "Maybe we'll even see the clouds up close." He beamed, and I let that little smile carry me past the dagger glares from my mother-in-law and the stone silence from my husband. We reached the check-in counter. Calvin handed over the passports like he was delivering a business report, stiff, mechanical, no warmth. I passed mine to the woman behind the counter and crouched down to unzip Leo's little backpack, fishing out his. The check-in agent frowned at her screen. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, politely confused. "There's no ticket for Leo Reed." I blinked. I booked with my husband's family," I said, voice suddenly tight. "There must be a mistake." The woman glanced toward Calvin, who was standing behind me with that smug patience I hated so much. He was scrolling his phone, deliberately detached. Vivian stepped up beside him, lips curled in satisfaction. "There's no mistake," she said, cool as ice. "Too many people on this trip. We left your kid behind." It took a second. Just one awful, suspended second before her words sank in like concrete shoes in water. My heartbeat stuttered. "What?" I whispered. Calvin didn't even look up from his phone. "This trip is for real family," he said casually, like we were discussing dinner options, not whether our 5-year-old had a plane ticket. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I looked at Leo, who stood there, blinking up at us, trying to understand why everything had just stopped. My hands trembled. I turned back to the check-in counter, hoping this was some sick misunderstanding, but the agent had already glanced away, uncomfortable. "Come on, Maya," Vivian said with a smirk. "You're always so dramatic." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just reached for Leo's hand, slowly and deliberately, my fingers wrapping around his small, warm ones. He looked confused, a little scared now, his eyebrows scrunched in that way that always made my chest ache. "Mommy," he asked softly, "am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," I murmured, trying to smile. "We're just going on a different adventure, that's all." Calvin snorted behind me. "Oh, come on, Maya. Don't make this a thing." But it was already a thing. A big thing. A massive, irreversible, soul-shattering thing. I straightened slowly, meeting Calvin's eyes for the first time that morning. "You left your son out of a family trip," I said, barely above a whisper. "You left your son." He shrugged like I'd just complained about cold coffee. I don't know what stopped me from screaming then and there, maybe Leo's hand in mine. Maybe years of swallowing my voice so that Calvin's could always echo louder. But in that moment, something inside me clicked into place. A silence I hadn't known I needed. A strange kind of peace. I turned without another word. We walked away, my son and I, the hum of the airport washing over us like white noise. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see Vivian's victory smirk or Calvin's bored indifference. Let them board that plane. Let them have their sun-soaked lies and their picture-perfect facade. Let them pretend. Because I wasn't pretending anymore. As Leo and I exited the terminal, the hot air wrapped around us again like a blanket. I bent down to his level and kissed his forehead. "We're gonna make new plans, okay?" He nodded, trusting, brave. He didn't need to understand everything right now. He just needed to know I was still holding his hand. And I was. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was falling behind or fading away. I felt like I had just taken my first step forward. We sat on a bench just outside the terminal, the wheels of Leo's tiny suitcase squeaking each time he shifted his weight beside me. His legs swung back and forth, not quite touching the ground. Planes soared overhead, cutting white trails through the sky, and the air carried the scent of exhaust, sweat, and sunblock. I clutched my phone in one hand and his small fingers in the other. My throat was tight, but I kept my smile steady for him. "Mommy," Leo asked, peering up at me with wide, worried eyes, "did I do something bad?" God, those words. I felt them like a blade slipping between my ribs. "No, baby." "No, no, no," I whispered quickly, pulling him into my arms. "You did nothing wrong. Do you hear me?" "Nothing." His arms wrapped around my waist, and his head pressed into my chest. I stroked his back, my heart pounding against his cheek, trying to memorize the rhythm of this moment, 1 part grief, 1 part rage, all love. I blinked hard against the tears burning behind my eyes. I couldn't cry. Not now. Not while he was watching. I pulled back just enough to see his face. "Leo, I promise you something right now," I said, cupping his cheeks. "You will never feel unwanted again. Not ever." He stared at me, serious and still, like he was trying to figure out whether promises like that could be real. And they had to be. Because I was done letting Calvin, and especially Vivian, decide what kind of life my son would have. They could call it whatever they wanted. A misunderstanding. A miscommunication. A decision. But I knew the truth. They'd looked at my child and decided he didn't belong. I wasn't going to give them the chance to do it again. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, hands shaking only slightly now. I opened my contacts and scrolled to the name I never thought I'd actually tap again, Sophie Lang, my best friend from college and the only person who'd ever said, "Maya, you deserve more," and actually meant it. She answered on the second ring. "Maya?" Her voice was sleepy but warm. "Hey, everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "Are you still in Orlando?" "Yeah, why?" I glanced down at Leo, who was now inspecting the worn corner of his backpack. "Do you have room for 2 surprise guests?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "Always." I let out a long breath and nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I need a favor. I need a miracle." "You've got one. Just tell me what flight to watch for." 30 minutes later, we were on our way to the ticket counter again, but this time, not for Bali, not for beachfront suites or fake smiles. This time it was just me and Leo, booking a direct flight to Orlando, Florida, a home of giant mouse ears, overpriced ice cream, and, hopefully, a place where he could smile again. The woman at the counter was kind. She noticed the dried tear stains on Leo's cheek and gave him a sticker shaped like Pluto without asking questions. She even bent down and said, "You going to see the castle, little guy?" Leo's eyes lit up like the sun broke through a storm. "The real one." I smiled, finally feeling my heartbeat start to slow. "The real one, baby." He clutched the sticker to his chest like it was gold. We walked toward security hand in hand, this time with real tickets, with real plans, with the most real moment I'd felt in years. I wasn't playing a part anymore, not the smiling wife, not the perfect daughter-in-law, not the woman who kept her mouth shut to keep the peace. I was just Leo's mom, and, for the first time, that was enough. As we cleared TSA and found our gate, Leo leaned into me and whispered, "Is Daddy gonna meet us there?" My smile faltered for a second. I brushed a finger across his cheek. "No, sweetheart. Just us this time." He looked thoughtful, as if he was trying to decide if that was okay. Then he nodded. "Okay. I like us." My throat caught again, but this time it wasn't pain, it was hope. This child, this brilliant, beautiful boy had just had his heart dented by the people who were supposed to love him most. And yet, he still glowed. Still trusted me. Still believed. I would not let that light go out. We boarded the plane, and he pressed his face against the window the whole time, pointing at the clouds and asking questions about how planes worked and whether Mickey Mouse ever flew in one. And as we lifted off, I made another silent promise to myself, this time not just for Leo, but for me too. We weren't running away from Calvin and Vivian. We were running towards something better. We stepped off the plane and into the Florida heat, a wave of warmth that hugged our skin and clung to our clothes. The smell of sunscreen, airport pretzels, and childhood dreams drifted through the air. Leo gripped my hand, practically vibrating with excitement, his tiny suitcase bumping behind him. "I smell Mickey," he whispered, eyes wide, scanning the terminal as if the mouse himself might pop out from behind a vending machine. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. "You might, baby." He's sneaky like that. We caught a shuttle to the resort, and Sophie met us at the entrance with her signature red curls pulled up in a bun and her arms wide open. "Oh my God, you're actually here," she said, hugging me like I'd just come home from war. "I needed an escape," I whispered into her shoulder. "No," she said, squeezing tighter, "you needed freedom." Leo stood shyly behind me, clutching his backpack until Sophie knelt and said, "You must be Leo. I've heard so much about you." He peeked up at her, then cracked a smile. "Do you know Buzz Lightyear?" "Personally," she grinned. "He owes me $5. He laughed, and just like that, the ice that had wrapped itself around both of us at that airport began to thaw. The next morning, we stepped into the gates of the Magic Kingdom, and Leo's eyes widened so far I thought they might fall out of his head. He grabbed my hand and pointed. "Look, Mommy, it's the castle. The real one." "Yes, baby," I whispered, as tears welled up in my eyes. "The real one." And it hit me not all at once, but like slow sunlight creeping over a mountain. For so long, I had convinced myself that our version of family had to include Calvin. That Leo needed a father present in every photo, even if he never looked at us in real life. That staying was better than breaking. But standing there, watching my son light up with joy so fierce it practically shone out of him, I realized something that made my heart ache and swell all at once. This was what family looked like. A shared smile. A safe hand to hold. Laughter that didn't come with conditions. We spent the entire day chasing magic. Leo wanted to try everything. He dragged me onto roller coasters I'd never dare ride alone. We hugged Goofy, high-fived Donald, and stood in line for nearly an hour just so he could tell Elsa he liked her shoes. And I didn't mind any of it, because every squeal, every giggle, every gasp of wonder reminded me that I was giving my son something priceless, the chance to feel cherished. After the third ride on the Dumbo carousel, we sat on a bench near the water with Mickey-shaped pretzels and lemon slushies in hand. Leo looked up at me, cheeks pink from the sun. "Mommy?" "Yeah, baby?" He bit his lip, as if testing the waters. Why didn't Grandma want me to come to Bali? It was the question I'd hoped wouldn't come. My heart clenched. I set my drink down and turned to face him fully, brushing the hair off his forehead. "Leo, some people, they don't know how to love the way you deserve to be loved. And that's not your fault. That's never your fault." He blinked up at me. "But Daddy didn't say anything." I nodded slowly. "I know. And I'm sorry for that." He didn't cry. He didn't pout. He just nodded once, like something settled inside him. Then he said, "I like it better here anyway." I let out a breath that had been trapped inside me since the airport. Me too. That night, back at the resort, we lay in our shared bed with Leo tucked beside me, still wearing his new Toy Story pajamas. He was half asleep, humming the tune from the parade we'd watched earlier. I watched him, his features so soft and peaceful now, so far from the confusion and pain he'd carried just 2 days ago. And I thought about Calvin. I thought about Vivian. About how they were probably sipping something expensive on a beach somewhere, taking photos they'd later post with captions like "Family is everything," while the one person who needed them most had been left behind. But it didn't matter anymore. Because Leo and I were here. And he was happy. And I was finally starting to feel free. I tucked the blanket around him and kissed the top of his head. "You are my magic, Leo," I whispered. "You are my whole world." He stirred only slightly, then mumbled, "To infinity and beyond." I smiled, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet of real love wrap itself around us like a warm spell. We were finishing our breakfast at the hotel's sunny outdoor patio, Leo digging happily into a Mickey waffle, his fingers sticky with syrup, when Sophie nudged her phone toward me with raised eyebrows. "You need to see this," she said, half whispering, half smirking. I glanced down at the screen, expecting some harmless celebrity gossip. Instead, I saw them. Calvin and Vivian on Instagram, perched in a private cabana surrounded by fruit platters and champagne flutes, draped in white linen like royalty on a throne. The caption read, "Family time in paradise, nothing more important." I blinked. My stomach twisted. There they were, beaming, posed, curated. Calvin's arms slung lazily over a lounge chair, sunglasses tilted just right. Vivian's smile wide and polished, untouched by the truth. A dozen photos followed. Beaches, sunsets, cocktails, Calvin snorkeling with a few cousins' kids. But not a single trace of Leo. I didn't realize I was gripping my coffee cup until Sophie gently touched my wrist. "Maya, look at the comments." I scrolled. And that's when I saw it. "Where's your son? Didn't Maya and Leo go too? No wife? No kid? This feels off. Not you leaving your actual child behind." The questions were piling up, stacking like bricks in a wall Calvin couldn't Photoshop away. Even the filtered glow of paradise couldn't cover the hollowness. People were starting to notice what I had lived with in silence for too long, how easily Calvin omitted us, how Vivian always controlled the narrative. But this time, they'd done it publicly. Boldly. And the world was watching. Sophie leaned over. "They underestimated the internet." I nodded slowly, still staring at the screen. "They always underestimate anyone who doesn't play their game." I clicked on Calvin's profile. His latest story showed him at a 5-star spa, captioned, "Self-care with family," as if that phrase could cleanse him of what he'd done. But the comments under each new post were turning into a digital storm. "Family? Where's the kid you left at the airport? Did Vivian really say too many people? You left your own son behind?" I didn't have to say a word. The world was saying it for me. Leo tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, can we go back to the Buzz Lightyear ride after breakfast?" I smiled down at him. Of course we can. His innocence grounded me. He didn't need to know that social media was chewing his father alive in real time. He didn't need to know that the people who called themselves family were now being publicly held accountable by strangers with sharp eyes and louder voices than I'd ever had in my marriage. While we walked through the park, my phone buzzed again and again in my bag. I didn't check it. Not while Leo ran ahead to hug a costumed Pluto or shouted, "To infinity," at the top of his lungs as he raced toward the Space Ranger spin. We stood in line for popcorn while fireworks bloomed overhead. He held my hand, sticky and warm, and rested his head against my side. I looked up at the sky and felt something strange. Not vindication. Not satisfaction. Peace. The internet was doing what it did best, exposing hypocrisy, shining light on curated lies. But for once, I wasn't at the center of the mess. I was simply watching from the calm place I'd created. Later that night, when Leo was asleep beside me, I finally gave in and opened my phone. I had dozens of missed calls, messages, and emails from Calvin, from Vivian, even from people I hadn't spoken to in years. One message from Camille, Calvin's sister, stood out. "Hey, Maya. I don't know what happened exactly, but people are talking. Mom's freaking out. Calvin says you made him look bad. Are you okay?" I stared at the words. Made him look bad. He still didn't get it. I didn't do anything but walk away with my son. I hadn't spoken a word to the press. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't even corrected anyone online. All I'd done was choose my child over a curated lie. And somehow, that was enough to unravel the carefully woven web Calvin and Vivian had spent years constructing. I closed the app and turned off my phone. Not because I was afraid of the storm, but because I didn't need it. The real story was already being told, in Leo's laughter, in our shared churros, in the glow on his face every time he said, "Best day ever." That was the story that mattered. And this time, we were the ones writing it. I was watching Leo dip his toes into the lazy river when my phone rang again. I'd muted most calls, silenced the notifications, and turned off every app that tried to pull me back into that other world, the world I had so deliberately walked away from. But this one rang through. Camille. I hadn't spoken to her since before the wedding. She was the only one in Calvin's family who'd ever shown me a sliver of humanity, but even that came in whispers, always just out of reach. I debated letting it ring out, but something in my chest whispered, "Pick up." I answered quietly, shielding my mouth with one hand as Leo splashed just a few feet away. "Hello, Maya?" Camille's voice cracked through the line, breathless, shaken. "Oh, thank God." I didn't think you'd answer. I didn't respond. Let her sit in the silence. "It's bad," she said, and her voice was different now, no longer composed or clipped like Vivian's. It was raw. Vivian's business. The investors are pulling out. It's like a chain reaction. They're panicking, asking questions. I sat down slowly on a poolside lounge chair. Questions about what? About you. About what happened at the airport. About the finances, too. Maya, the IRS is involved. Someone tipped them off about inconsistencies. I don't know how long they've been sniffing around, but now they're all over everything. I looked toward Leo, watching him toss a small beach ball toward another child. His laughter rose like music above the water. "And why are you telling me this?" I asked flatly. "Because I think you're the only one who can stop it." That made me laugh, and it wasn't bitter or cruel, it was stunned. "Me? Camille," I walked away. "I didn't touch a thing. I didn't leak anything. I'm not the reason Vivian's empire is crumbling." She exhaled hard. "I know. That's the worst part. You didn't have to do anything. You were the glue, Maya. You were always the one holding the books, smoothing things over, fixing what she and Calvin broke behind the scenes. Everyone thought Vivian was this genius, but it was you." I stared out at the pool, remembering the late nights, the endless spreadsheets, the whispered phone calls to accountants who weren't supposed to know my name. I had covered for Vivian more times than I could count. Balanced ledgers that weren't mine. Smiled through meetings where my voice was never invited. And now that I was gone, the whole thing was cracking. "You want me to come back?" I asked, the disbelief making my voice shake. "After what he did to Leo?" "No," she said quickly. "I mean, yes. I mean, not for them. I mean to stop this. Before it ruins everything. Before the entire family falls apart." I let her words hang in the air. The entire family. The same family that smirked when Leo was denied a boarding pass. The same family that called me too sensitive, too emotional, too soft to lead anything meaningful. The same family that only saw my worth when it held their house of cards together. I rubbed my temple. "You have no idea what you're asking, Camille." There was a long pause on her end. "I know. But I also know you didn't deserve what they did to you. Or to Leo. And now, they're paying for it." I hung up without another word. Leo came running over, face glowing, water dripping from his curls. "Mommy, did you see me float like a sea otter?" I laughed and pulled him into a towel. "I did. You're practically a fish now." He beamed and leaned into my side. "Are we staying here forever?" I kissed his damp forehead. "Something like that." That night, I lay in bed with my laptop open, curiosity getting the better of me. I searched Vivian's company name and found a flurry of headlines. Reed Industries under investigation for financial misconduct. Where's the CEO? Vivian Reed silent amid backlash. Hashtag Where is Leo trends as public turns on socialite family. They were being devoured, publicly, financially, reputationally. And for the first time, I wasn't cleaning up the mess. I was simply watching it collapse. And the strange part was, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug or vindicated. I felt relieved. Free. Like the weight I'd carried for years, being the unseen pillar, had finally fallen off my shoulders. They were finally facing the cost of their cruelty. And I was no longer footing the bill. The calls started again the next morning. First Calvin. Then Vivian. Then Calvin again. Each time, I let them ring. Each time, the familiar ache stirred inside me, not pain anymore, but something colder. Distance. A reminder that I no longer lived under their roof or their rules. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. By noon, my voicemail was full. My inbox overflowed with desperate subject lines. We need to talk. Please. Just a few minutes. Maya, don't ignore me. I wasn't ignoring them. I was choosing silence. After everything, after the airport, after Leo's eyes searched mine for answers I couldn't give, after their public charade crumbled, I owed them nothing. I had already paid with years of quiet sacrifice. I had already given more than they ever appreciated. Still, a part of me, some echo of the woman I used to be, picked up the phone that afternoon. Leo was napping in the room. Sophie had taken her laptop to the pool to work. The sun poured through the curtains in soft strips, and the hum of the resort life buzzed beneath our floor. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart steady, thumb hovering over the green callback button under Calvin's name. I pressed it. It rang only once. Maya, he said, voice cracking like he hadn't breathed until that moment. Thank God. I said nothing. I didn't know what was happening. He rushed on. Things are going insane over here. People are calling me a monster. Reporters are showing up. Vivian is losing it. Camille's blaming me. I need to talk to you. You're already talking, I said flatly. There was a pause. I didn't mean for it to go like that. At the airport. It was supposed to be a reset. Just some space. Mom said. Stop. My voice was calm. Clear. You're really going to say it was your mother's idea? Silence. I watched you laugh, Calvin, I said, my grip tightening around the phone. I saw her smirk, and I heard you laugh as she said, too many people. We left your kid behind. And you stood there. You let her. You agreed. He exhaled heavily, like he was trying to conjure some version of himself that didn't exist. It was a mistake. I got caught in the moment. I didn't think. No, you didn't think, I cut in. You didn't think about your son. About what it would mean to tell a 5-year-old he wasn't family. You didn't think about the damage. You just left him. There was a quiet whimper in the background. Vivian, maybe, or some other ghost from our past life, trying to whisper her way into the conversation. I didn't care. Maya, please, Calvin begged. We need you. I need you. No, I said, my voice a knife now. You need the woman who made your world run while you gave credit to someone else. You need the woman who raised your child while you posed for the cameras. You need the woman who covered the holes in your mother's finances while she smiled for headlines. His breath stuttered. That's not fair. No, I snapped. What's not fair is my son asking if he was bad because his father left him behind. What's not fair is me raising Leo alone in a marriage while you played house with your mother. He tried again, quieter this time. Why are you doing this? I stared out the window, watching the palm trees sway in the distance. I'm not doing anything, I said. You did this. The moment you let Leo cry at that check-in counter, you chose this. He went silent again. Good. I stood up and walked over to the nightstand where a framed picture of Leo and me, him holding a giant Buzz Lightyear plush, his cheeks still round from laughter, sat beside a vase of lilies Sophie had brought. I stared at that photo and felt something click into place. I'm building something better now, I said softly. Something honest. Something safe. Maya. I'll answer your lawyer's call, I said, already pulling the phone away from my ear. No, wait. We can fix this. Just give us a chance. I hung up. And then, finally, I blocked his number. Blocked Vivian's too. Because it wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about protecting Leo. His joy. His right to feel loved, wanted, and whole. I wouldn't let their desperation seep back into the peaceful life we were starting to build. They were spiraling, and they wanted me to come down with them. But I wasn't falling anymore. I was rising. It was just after 9 a.m. when the knock came, sharp, impatient, and loud enough to echo through the entire house. I had just finished braiding Leo's hair into a messy crown while he munched cereal and watched cartoons. The knock made him jump. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. I told Leo to stay on the couch and walked slowly to the door. I opened it, already bracing myself for the chill in the air that always came when they entered a room, even without speaking. Calvin stood there, dressed in his usual expensive slacks and a polo shirt like we were still playing house. Vivian stood beside him, a beige designer trench draped perfectly across her shoulders like she'd arrived straight from a magazine shoot. But the image cracked as soon as I looked into their eyes. Calvin looked desperate. Vivian looked hollow. "Maya," he started, voice low, rehearsed. "We need to talk." I didn't move. "Talk, then." He glanced at Vivian, then back to me. "Not here. Can we come in?" "No." Vivian scoffed quietly. Still so dramatic. I ignored her. "Say what you came to say." "The clock's ticking." Calvin shifted, clearly uncomfortable in the new power dynamic. "We're here because things have gotten out of hand. We didn't come to fight. We came to make things right." I raised an eyebrow. "You think that's possible?" "Maya, please," he said. "You blocked our calls. You shut us out. But this isn't just about us anymore. The business, our lives, everything's falling apart." Vivian stepped forward then, voice clipped and polished. "We've had issues, fine. But we're family. And family works through issues. You don't burn the house down over a misunderstanding." I stared at her. "Misunderstanding? You stood in front of me at the airport and smirked as you said my son didn't have a ticket. You called him extra." Calvin laughed. Her lips twitched, her composure briefly cracking. "I was joking." "No," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "You were showing your true self. You've never seen Leo as your grandson. He wasn't a photo op or a business deal, so he didn't matter." She said nothing. Calvin ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "We made a mistake." "Okay. A horrible one. But you've made your point. The media's killing us. The IRS won't leave us alone. I've lost partners. I've lost contracts. We're trying to survive here." I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound that surprised even me. "So now I matter. Now you're here. When your empire is crumbling. When your mother's legacy is a headline punchline. But where were you when Leo cried in that terminal, asking if he did something bad?" He flinched. "I'm not coming back," I said, stepping even closer. "I'm not fixing this for you. I'm not saving you." Calvin's voice broke then. "You're throwing away everything?" "No," I said, and this time my voice was calm. "You threw everything away." I reached inside and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared weeks ago. Calmly, I handed it to him. He opened it, and his eyes darted across the page. He looked up, stunned. "Divorce papers?" "Signed and ready to go," I said. "All I need is your signature." Vivian stepped forward then, voice shaking beneath her usual chill. "You'd really do this to your husband? To the father of your child?" I turned to her slowly, my gaze steady. "You raised a son who sees his child as disposable. This is your legacy." Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. "You don't get to cry victim now," I continued. "You built this illusion of control, of power, of perfection. And now that the curtain's falling, you're scrambling for a stage." Calvin looked defeated, the envelope dangling in his hand like a weight. "Can I at least see him?" I studied him, searching for even a flicker of genuine remorse. Not the kind that comes from losing money or fame, but the kind that comes from realizing you failed as a father. "If you want to see Leo," I said slowly, "you will follow my terms. No Vivian. Ever. If I see her within a mile of him, the door closes forever." Vivian gasped like I'd slapped her. But I'm his grandmother. No, I said. You're the woman who humiliated him. Who made him feel small. Who taught her son that cruelty is love. You forfeited that title. I didn't wait for her reply. I turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind me with a soft, firm click. The kind that didn't need to slam to make its point. Leo looked up from the couch, big eyes watching me. Who was that? I smiled and sat beside him, pulling him close. No one important. And, for the first time in years, I meant it. There was no dramatic shift, no single moment where everything suddenly felt healed. But peace, I learned, didn't arrive like thunder. It settled in like soft rain, quiet, steady, a gentle hush after the storm. Our mornings became slower. Leo no longer jumped at loud noises or clung to my leg whenever the doorbell rang. He sang while brushing his teeth, made elaborate Lego cities on the living room floor, and asked questions about everything again: why clouds were fluffy, how pancakes got bubbles, whether squirrels dream. He'd always been curious, but now his curiosity returned without fear. That told me everything I needed to know. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the back porch, drawing stick figure superheroes with capes that reached the ground. When I asked who they were, he pointed to the biggest one. That's you, he said simply. You saved me. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't let it show. I just kissed the top of his head and told him he had the best imagination in the world. But deep down, I held his words like a medal. Not because I needed to be a hero, but because it meant he saw me. He felt safe. And that was everything. The house was smaller than the one Calvin and I had shared, but it was mine. Ours. The walls echoed laughter instead of judgment. The furniture didn't match. The kitchen tiles had a small crack near the sink, and our backyard was a wild jungle of untrimmed bushes and scattered toys. But it felt real. Alive. Free. I started baking again, nothing fancy, mostly whatever Leo and I decided on that morning. Banana muffins, chocolate chip cookies, cinnamon toast. He'd drag a chair up to the counter and mix things with too much flour and too little patience. I let him. I let the mess stay a little longer than I used to, because peace doesn't care about perfection. Then, one day, the phone rang again. This time it was Calvin's lawyer. They'd received the signed divorce papers. There were no arguments, no conditions, just a quiet acceptance, like even he knew the damage had already been done. 2 days later, Calvin called. I almost didn't answer, but I'd made a promise to myself to move forward with grace, not resentment. So I picked up. His voice was tired, less polished than usual. Hey. I signed the papers, he said. It's official now. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I know. A pause. Thank you for letting me see Leo. I didn't reply right away. It's not about letting you. It's about protecting him. I get it, he said. And I accept your terms. Vivian won't be involved. Ever. Something in me softened, just a little. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but clarity. I hope you're not agreeing just to keep access, I said. Because if she ever crosses that line. She won't, he cut in. She's dealing with her own consequences now. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. The next weekend, Calvin came by to visit Leo. I kept it simple, an hour at the park, no sleepovers, no alone time yet. He brought a kite, and I watched from a bench as Leo ran across the grass, his laughter trailing behind the tail of a blue and red dragon flapping in the wind. Calvin tried. He knelt to tie Leo's shoe, clapped when the kite caught air, answered questions about airplanes. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. And Leo, in his endless generosity, gave him a chance. Because that's what kids do. They forgive before they understand the weight of what's being forgiven. When they came back over, Calvin handed Leo a juice box, and Leo turned to me. Mommy, can he come back next weekend? I looked at Calvin. If he stays true to his word. He nodded solemnly. After they left, Leo curled up on the couch beside me with his blanket and a book, his feet tucked under my leg like always. He looked up at me with a sleepy smile. "We have a good house," he said. "We really do," I whispered. And we did. Not because it was big or flawless, but because there was no fear in the corners. No eggshells underfoot. No pretending. We had rebuilt something better. Leo thrived. I watched his confidence grow daily. His teachers sent notes home praising how kind he was, how curious, how bright. He made friends. He danced in the living room. He fell asleep without tears. And me? I smiled more. I slept deeper. I took up painting again, just small canvases by the window, colors blooming under my fingertips that I didn't know I still remembered how to mix. I let myself feel joy, not just relief. For the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't surviving. I was living. It was a Thursday morning when Calvin called again. This time, he didn't ask to see Leo. This time, his voice was different. Hesitant. Flat in a way that sounded like someone had deflated everything inside him. "I lost everything," he said. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and a sketchbook open in front of me. Leo was still asleep upstairs, his blanket always pulled up to his chin now, like a little cocoon of comfort. I didn't answer Calvin right away. I let his words hang in the silence between us. "I mean it," he said. "The house, gone. Mom's accounts are frozen. She's being investigated. The board voted me out of my own company. Everything just collapsed." I stirred my tea slowly. "I'm sorry that happened." He sighed. "Are you?" I looked out the window. The sun was rising over the backyard, casting long golden streaks across the grass. "I'm sorry it took that for you to finally call and speak like a human." That quieted him. For once, there was no defensive comeback. No thinly veiled insult. Just silence. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. I was blind, Maya. I see it now. How I treated you. How I treated Leo. I didn't protect either of you. And my mother, she poisoned so much of how I saw the world." "No," I said, voice steady. "She didn't make you laugh at our son's pain. She didn't force you to turn your back on us. You chose that." "I know," he said quickly. "I know that now. And I hate myself for it." A long pause followed, one filled with 100 unspoken things. I didn't try to fill it. Let him sit in the discomfort for once. "You said I lost everything," he continued, voice lower now, raw. "But that's not true. I didn't lose it. I gave it away." That hit something. I felt it in my ribs, in the pit of my stomach. Because for once, he wasn't wrong. He had given it away. Piece by piece. He traded love for power. Family for appearances. A son for a photo op. "You did," I said simply. There was another breath of silence, and then, like it took everything in him to ask, "Is there anything left to fix?" I exhaled softly, resting my hand over the phone. "No." Not in anger. Not in cruelty. Just truth. The kind that echoed deeper than yelling ever could. "I don't hate you," I added after a long pause. "But I'm done making myself small to save you. I gave everything I had to that marriage, Calvin. And when you had a chance to show Leo he was safe, you broke him." "I know," he said, barely a whisper. "You made your choice," I said. "And now I've made mine." I could hear him breathing, but there were no more words. No bargaining left. He knew. Deep down, he'd known before he even dialed. "I hope you find peace," I said softly, and then I ended the call. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I was already on the other side of the hurt. I had already walked through the fire. What remained now was clarity, not sadness. That afternoon, Leo and I went to the park. He brought his sketchpad, too, and we sat under a tree, both of us drawing. He drew dragons and robots and one suspiciously detailed unicorn. I drew a landscape of our backyard, wild and untamed, just the way we liked it. "Mommy," Leo said, glancing up from his page. "Is Daddy sad?" I didn't lie. "Yes, I think he is." "Did he do something bad?" I paused. He made a really big mistake. but he's trying to learn from it. Leo thought about that for a moment. Then he nodded, his curls bouncing with the movement. Okay. I still like drawing with him sometimes. And you will, I said, brushing a hand over his hair. But your heart comes first, okay? If anyone ever makes you feel small again, even a little, you tell me. He leaned into my side, pressing his cheek against my arm. I like it better here, he whispered. I smiled into the breeze. Me too. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft streaks of pink and orange, I realized that Calvin's regret was no longer mine to carry. I didn't need him to fall apart to feel better. I didn't need him to pay some dramatic price. Because his punishment wasn't what he lost. It was knowing he'd thrown it all away, and the peace he once overlooked now lived in a house without him. And I wasn't rebuilding for him. I was rebuilding for us. The late afternoon sun draped itself over the backyard like a soft quilt, warming the patchy grass and glowing against the side of the house. I stood at the kitchen window, watching Leo run barefoot through the yard, a paper crown on his head, sword made of cardboard, and cape fashioned from one of my old scarves. He was giggling, chasing butterflies and imaginary dragons, and every now and then, he'd pause and wave toward the house, toward me, just to make sure I was still watching. And I always was. This had become our rhythm. Our normal. Quiet mornings with pancakes shaped like animals. Lazy weekends at the library. Evenings drawing with crayons or dancing to whatever song he loved that week. No more silence filled with tension. No more cold stares across dinner tables. No more whispered arguments through clenched teeth while Leo pretended not to hear. We were free now. Not just from them, but from the version of life I once thought I had to accept. And in that freedom, we found a new kind of joy. One not measured by perfection or performance, but by peace. I stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, and walked barefoot into the yard. Leo ran up to me, his face flushed and bright. Mommy, I saved the kingdom. You did, I said, laughing. All by yourself? He nodded solemnly. The dragon was gonna eat the queen, but I used my sword and said no. And then he flew away. Very brave of you, I said, kneeling to tie the shoelace on his untied sneaker. The queen owes you big time. He puffed his chest. You're the queen. I froze for a second, a lump rising in my throat, then smiled through it. Well then, my hero, thank you for saving me. He grinned and ran off again, his scarf cape billowing behind him. I sat down on the porch steps, my coffee now cold, but I didn't care. I just watched. Because this was the prize. This was the true victory, not the headlines, not the scandals that ruined Vivian's pristine reputation, not the way Calvin's empire collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. That wasn't my triumph. This was a happy child, a quiet heart, a home filled with love instead of fear. The world had assumed I'd want revenge, that I'd plot and scheme and wait for the moment to strike. And maybe, once upon a time, I would have. But I'd learned that revenge only keeps you tethered to the pain. And I didn't want to be tethered anymore. Vivian hadn't called in weeks. Not since word got out that several former investors were suing, and that federal investigators were combing through her records line by line. Camille told me in a brief, apologetic message that Vivian had gone quiet, retreated into one of her vacation properties, too embarrassed to be seen, too proud to apologize. Calvin, true to his word, had kept his visits respectful and distant. Leo liked seeing him occasionally. They played checkers at the park, ate ice cream, shared drawings. But there was always a boundary now. A line Calvin never crossed. He never asked to come inside. He never brought his mother. And most importantly, he never tried to make me feel small again. Leo made the rules now, and I enforced them. I hadn't just rebuilt my life, I had rewritten the rules of it entirely. One evening, after Leo had fallen asleep under a blanket of stars he'd glued to his bedroom ceiling, I sat on the back porch with Sophie, sipping wine and listening to the wind rustle through the trees. You know what's funny, she said. You didn't burn them down. You just left. And they crumbled all on their own. I didn't need fire, I said softly. I needed freedom. She raised her glass. To freedom, then. I clinked mine against hers. Later, as I stood by Leo's door and watched his chest rise and fall in sleep, I thought about all the things we'd lost and all the things we'd gained. I thought about the lies we escaped, the strength we found, the love we nurtured like a fragile seed that finally bloomed. This wasn't the story I once pictured. No perfect house in the hills. No photo ops or socialite brunches. But what I had now, this messy, cozy, laughter-filled life, was something they could never touch. They had each other, sure. But Leo had me, and I had him. We didn't need anything else. As the last light of the day slipped beneath the horizon and the stars began to blink awake, I whispered to myself what I now knew to be true. Victory wasn't in seeing them fall. It was in watching us rise.